In chapter 14 of the book of Judges, we now pick up on the life of Samson after he's grown up. Chapter 13 was wonderful. We have this special calling of God, a special dedication of Samson to being a Nazarite who would be dedicated to God, and he would be one of the judges. The goal was to begin to deliver the people from the Philistines. But when he grows up, he's not the man of God that we would hope that he would be. He comes from what seems to be a good family. He's dedicated by God to himself to serve him. But Samson is not turned out very well. And the first thing we hear about Samson's life is he goes down to the daughters of the Philistines in verse 1, and he sees a good-looking gal, verse 3, and he wants to marry her. His whole goal here is to marry this gal because verse 3 says she looks good to me. Now, Samson's father resists because the Old Testament law said that the Jews were to marry within their own nation, and often within their own tribes, but definitely within their own nation. And he says, isn't there anybody in Israel who looks good to you that you could marry? But he didn't like that idea, and he drops all the way down to verse 7 and says to him, she looks good to me. I want that gal. And so his father does that for him. Now, on the way down to marry her, we come up with one of the first great stories of Samson. He's walking along. Verse 6, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. This tells us that it is possible that Samson was not super powerful all the time. Matter of fact, this is going to be the first time we hear of his great strength. So he may not have been powerful except when the Spirit of the Lord came on him. At any rate, a lion comes out to threaten him. He tears the lion, kills the lion, and leaves it behind. And then he goes on, and later on he comes back, verse 9, and some bees have made a nest in the carcass of the lion, and he goes over and he scrapes some honey from the lion. Now, it's possible that this is the first time that Samson's ever touched a dead body, because the Nazarites were not to touch dead bodies, and so perhaps he's never done that. So if that's the case, then he's kind of compromising. He's taking light his vows. He's touching a dead body and is eating and this honey and giving some later to his parents. And then he comes back to marry this gal, and he is making light. He's joking about things as he comes to marry this gal he shouldn't be marrying. And he propounds to some people a riddle. And he says, if you can solve my riddle, then I'll give you I'll give you clothing, 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothing. And if you can't solve my riddle, you have to do it for me. And here's his riddle, verse 14. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong comes something sweet. So that was going back to his killing of the lion, of course. Well, they could not solve the riddle, these Philistines, and so they entice his wife to be, verse 15, to find out the answer. Otherwise, they threaten to burn down her house. So out of fear, apparently, she presses him in verse 17 until finally he gives up, and towards the end of the 7 days, gives the answer to the riddle to her. She gives it to the Philistines, and they come up and they say in verse 18, what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? They solve his riddle, and Samson is livid. He is angry. He said to them, if you have not plowed with my heifer, you have not have solved my riddle. There's a good thing to say about your wife-to-be. She calls her a heifer. So he's not exactly a man to model your marriage after at this point. But anyway, we find then in verse 19 that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, so now he has power again, and he goes out, he kills 30 probably relatively innocent people. They were Philistines, but they were not involved in this conversation, I don't think. And he takes their garments, and he delivers them to the people he made the riddle with, and so forth. But he was angry. In his arrogance and pride, he is angry, and he leaves behind his wife to be. Now, it's complicated in that time because often the betrothal period was kind of what we think of engagements, but in those days it was more binding. It was the first stage of marriage. So Samson seems to think that he was married, but the father of the bride doesn't seem to understand it that way. So in verse 20, he gives Samson's wife to his companion who had been his friend. So a friend of Samson's, probably a Philistine, is given Samson's wife. And that's going to set up some real problems coming into chapter 15. Samson's an angry, arrogant man. He's going to come back and things are not going to go well. We'll see that in chapter 15.